A Michigan couple set out on their anniversary hunt deep in the state's wilderness and simply never returned, dissolving into the endless green with no tracks, gear, or clues left behind. Exactly 2 years later, their Irish wolfhound, once a towering, carefree giant, dragged himself onto his in-laws' porch. He was skin and bones, one foreleg clumsily wrapped, a small cut on his head, yet still wearing the same gentle eyes that had followed his master everywhere. And with that arrival, the mystery that had haunted the Spence family quietly roared back to life. 72-year-old Elizabeth Spence was in her vegetable patch when she noticed the shape on the porch. Gardening had become a slow battle with creaky knees and stubborn weeds, but she refused to surrender the plants she'd tended for decades. A timer in the kitchen reminded her a pot roast was on the stove. She straightened, rubbed the ache in her back, and started for the house, only to freeze when she saw the dog. Dirt and burrs clung to his matted coat. Ribs showed beneath the fur, and the makeshift bandage on his leg was dirty and loose. But one look at those eyes told her it was Rufus, her son Dean's loyal companion. Elizabeth's trowel slipped from numb fingers. "Rufus?" she breathed, hand clutching her chest. The hound managed a faint wag of his tail. 2 years had passed since Dean Spence, a DEA field officer, and his wife Jocelyn vanished on that hunting trip with their dog. Search teams scoured miles of forest and found nothing. Now Rufus was here, silent proof that the story wasn't over. Her hands shook as she thumbed her phone. 911, what's your emergency? This is Elizabeth Spence, she whispered, forcing the words out. My son's dog, missing 2 years, just appeared on my porch. He's hurt. Please send help. Units were dispatched immediately. While she waited, Elizabeth slid to the porch steps, eyes locked on the exhausted hound. Where's Dean, boy? Where's my son? Sirens cut through the summer air. Officers Morrison and Bradley, familiar faces from the original search, pulled in. Both stared at Rufus, disbelief etched across their features. Morrison knelt beside the dog, speaking softly. We'll get him treated right away, Mrs. Spence, then talk at the station, he assured her. If Rufus survived, there's still hope for Dean and Jocelyn. An animal caravan arrived, and a veterinarian examined the dog with gentle efficiency. Malnourished, dehydrated, minor head injury, but alive. As they lifted Rufus onto a stretcher, Elizabeth realized that his unexpected return might finally crack open the case that had tormented her family for 2 relentless years. The next chapter of the search was about to begin. They gently lifted Rufus onto a stretcher, the dog letting out a soft whimper, too exhausted to resist. Elizabeth sat silently in the back of Officer Morrison's patrol car, her mind spinning. How had Rufus survived 2 years in the wild? Who had patched his leg? And most painfully, what had become of Dean and Jocelyn? As the police station came into view, it felt distant, like she was watching a scene from someone else's life. Inside, she was led not to a harsh interrogation room, but to a quieter space. Soft chairs, warm lighting, and the faint smell of coffee drifting from the corner. I'm Detective Walsh, a composed woman in her 40s introduced herself. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Elizabeth had only one concern. Where's the dog? Is he being looked after? Dr. Hernandez from the emergency clinic is with him now, Walsh replied. She'll update us as soon as she can. In the meantime, I need you to walk us through exactly what happened. More officers trickled into the room, faces she remembered from Dean's time with the DEA. Uniforms, badges, concern in their eyes. Elizabeth recounted the moment she found Rufus. As her voice steadied, the room quieted. The officers listened intently, jotting notes, asking careful questions. When was the last time you saw Rufus before today? Did anything feel off around the house lately? Detective Walsh tapped her pen thoughtfully. That bandage, there's no way a dog did that himself. Someone tried to help him. Then someone saw him, Elizabeth insisted. Someone knows something. A second detective nodded. We've already deployed search teams, starting at your property, tracing every step the dog might have taken. Just then, Dr. Hernandez arrived, still in her scrubs. He's stable, she announced. Elizabeth exhaled, relief flooding her. He's sedated while we treat his injuries and run tests. He's severely underweight and dehydrated, but someone cared for him at some point, though it's been a while. That bandage is old. Weeks, maybe more. When can I see him? Elizabeth asked quietly. Give us a few hours. I'll bring him to you as soon as he's strong enough, the vet promised. Mrs. Spence, that dog didn't just survive. He fought like hell to come home. Elizabeth nodded, tears threatening again. Rufus made it. But where was Dean? The interview room was growing stuffy, packed with officers, detectives, and more questions. Word had spread fast. Dean Spence's dog was back, and everyone wanted answers. Mrs. Spence, Walsh said gently, before they left, did Dean mention anything odd? Any threats? Anything about work? Elizabeth shook her head slowly. No. He was excited. They planned that trip for months, said the northern woods were perfect for deer this time of year. The door opened again. In stepped DEA Lieutenant Marcus Hayes, whom Elizabeth remembered from past department events. His expression was grim. I'm sorry you're going through this, he said sincerely. We're pulling every file from Dean's last 2 months on duty. If someone was targeting him, we'll find it. A younger officer stepped forward, piercing blue eyes and military posture. Mrs. Spence, I'm Officer Dmitry Volkov. I worked joint ops with Dean. He's one of the good ones. The conversation swirled around her, possibilities, theories, strategy, but Elizabeth's energy was fading. Her joints ached, her head throbbed, and the long hours were catching up. I think that's enough for now, Officer Volkov said, noticing her discomfort. She needs rest. We'll coordinate from here. Walsh nodded. Is there someone we can call to stay with you? My other son, Niels. But he's working in Detroit. It'll take time. I'll take you home, Volkov offered kindly. Let's make sure you're comfortable and safe. Elizabeth accepted. Driving herself wasn't an option. Her hands were still trembling. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Hernandez called. He's stable, but still sedated, she explained. If it's okay, I'd like to bring him to your house this evening. Familiar smells and sounds might help him as he wakes up. Yes, please, Elizabeth said, without hesitation. He belongs at home. The drive back felt like floating through fog. Officer Volkov kept conversation light, asking about her garden, her years in the community. At the house, he walked her to the door, helped her with the lock, and quietly checked all windows and doors. Search teams will work through the night, he said reassuringly. Every available unit is out there. We'll find something, Mrs. Spence. Inside, Elizabeth sank into her favorite chair, the one where she used to watch Dean and Niels play on summer afternoons. Volkov lingered by the door. Would you like me to stay until your son arrives? He offered. No, she said softly. You've been very kind. I'll be all right. She paused, then looked up at him, voice barely above a whisper. Do you think Dean could still be alive? Something flickered across Officer Volkov's face. Concern, maybe sympathy, but it vanished before Elizabeth could name it. Still, his words gave her a sliver of hope. If anyone could survive out there, it would be Dean. He knew those woods better than most. The sound of tires on gravel broke the moment. Elizabeth glanced out the window just as Neil's truck skidded into the driveway, dust kicking up behind it. Her younger son was out of the cab before the vehicle had even stopped, bounding up the steps and bursting through the door. Mom! Niels wrapped her in a hug that was careful but full of urgency. At 38, he was everything Dean wasn't. Fiery, emotional, impulsive. I'm sorry I couldn't get here sooner. Traffic was a mess and my boss was being He cut himself short as he noticed the uniformed man nearby. "Sorry, Neil Spence." "Officer Dmitry Volkov," the other man said, shaking his hand. "I just made sure your mother got home safely." Niels turned back to Elizabeth, eyes wide. "Is it true, Rufus? He's back?" Elizabeth nodded. "He's at the vet clinic. Dr. Hernandez will bring him soon. He's in bad shape, but alive." Niels ran both hands through his hair, so much like their father used to do that Elizabeth's heart caught in her chest. 2 years, he muttered. "How is that even possible?" "That's what we're working to find out," Volkov replied. "I should head back and help coordinate the search teams." He handed Elizabeth a card. "Call if you remember anything that might help." "Thank you," she said. "You've been incredibly kind." Volkov had just stepped off the porch when another vehicle turned in. A white veterinary van, decals gleaming. Dr. Hernandez stepped out, already pulling on gloves. "Perfect timing," she called. "He's starting to come around. I could use a hand getting him inside." Volkov didn't hesitate. He turned right back around. Together, they opened the van's rear doors. Rufus lay on a cushioned stretcher, groggy but conscious. At the sound of voices, his ears twitched. His eyes, still clouded by sedation, lifted slowly. "Easy, boy," Dr. Hernandez said softly. "We've got you." But before she could finish, Rufus locked eyes with Volkov and changed. A deep guttural growl rumbled from his chest. Then, despite his condition, the dog lunged forward, snarling and barking with wild ferocity. His lips curled back, teeth bared. It was violent, raw. No one moved. "Whoa." Niels jumped between his mother and the stretcher, shielding her instinctively. Volkov took several steps back, hands raised. "It's okay," he said quickly. "I probably smell like Duke. My K9 unit's been in my car all morning. That could be all it is. Territorial stuff." But Rufus wasn't buying it. His growls only deepened, eyes locked on the officer, unblinking. No amount of coaxing from the vet calmed him. "Maybe you should go," Niels said, tone firmer now. "We'll take it from here." Volkov nodded, forcing a thin smile. "Yeah, probably best. German shepherds have a different vibe. Rufus might just be reacting to that." He backed toward his car. "I'll check in tomorrow." Only after his vehicle had disappeared down the road did Rufus begin to settle, though he kept glancing at the door, a low rumble still vibrating in his throat. "That was unusual," Dr. Hernandez said, visibly unsettled. "Dogs don't usually react like that to a scent, not in his condition." "Let's get him inside," she added. "He needs rest, and I want to keep an eye on him. Mrs. Spence, do you still have his bed?" "Everything's just as they left it," Elizabeth murmured. "I couldn't bring myself to change a thing." Together, they carried Rufus in. Elizabeth couldn't stop thinking about that moment, the dog's reaction to Officer Volkov. In all the years Rufus had been part of their lives, she had never seen him act like that. An hour later, Dr. Hernandez departed, satisfied that Rufus was stable. He now lay in the corner of the living room, on the same bed where he used to curl up during visits from Dean and Jocelyn. His breathing was shallow but steady. His ribs rose and fell with each labored breath. At the kitchen table, 2 cups of untouched coffee sat between Niels and Elizabeth. The silence was heavy. "He loved that dog more than anything," Niels said finally, watching Rufus sleep. "Remember when he first brought him home? Jocelyn was so mad. You didn't say he'd be the size of a horse." Elizabeth managed a weak smile. She fell for him just as fast, though. Used to sneak him snacks when Dean wasn't looking. "Dean always knew," Niels said, smiling faintly. "He just pretended not to." They both fell quiet again. Outside, the sky began to darken. Inside, the unanswered questions only grew heavier. Elizabeth flexed her aching fingers, the pain in her swollen knuckles flaring under the weight of the day's tension. "Mom, That scene with the officer, Niels began. I know. It was unsettling, she answered. Dean always swore Rufus could size a person up faster than any human could. Remember the contractor who tried to overcharge us for the deck? Rufus blocked the doorway, and sure enough, the man turned out to be running scams all over the county. The phone rang, slicing through the quiet. Elizabeth's pulse spiked. Every call felt heavy with possibility. With trembling hands, she put it on speaker so Niels could listen. Mrs. Spence, Detective Walsh here. I have an update on the search. We've had teams in the forest since this afternoon, Walsh reported. They tracked what appears to be Rufus's prints from deep in the woods toward inhabited areas. The K9 units followed the trail for several miles, but it wanders, exactly what we'd expect from a dog hunting and foraging on his own. We lost it at a few stream crossings. But someone wrapped his leg, Elizabeth insisted. Someone helped him. We agree it's unusual, Walsh said gently. Our best guess is a hunter or hiker gave him quick first aid. The bandage is crude and might have been there weeks. In these woods, people often assist injured animals without ever filing a report. Niels could barely keep the frustration from his voice. So, what are you saying? Walsh sighed. Given the dog's condition, the winding track, and the time span, our working theory is that Rufus has survived in the wild for the past 2 years. Dogs adapt remarkably well, especially a sturdy breed like an Irish wolfhound. You think my brother's gone, Elizabeth said, her voice flat. Mrs. Spence, I know it's hard to hear. After 2 years without a sighting, and no shelters or camps beyond what we found during the initial search, the most likely scenario is that Dean and Jocelyn suffered an accident, perhaps a fall or a wildlife encounter, while Rufus, being an animal, managed to keep going. Niels snapped, Dean was DEA trained and knew those woods better than anyone. You can't just write him off. We're not quitting, Walsh replied evenly. Teams will keep combing every cave, ravine, and hollow. I wanted to be transparent about what we found. Elizabeth ended the call. Niels slammed his fist on the table. They're already bracing us for the worst, just like last time. 3 months of searching back then, and they called it. They did everything they could, she said softly. Not enough. Dean wouldn't simply vanish. Even if something happened, there'd be evidence, something. Elizabeth couldn't bring herself to finish the thought about animals or decay. Niels paced, anger cooling into determination. Look at Rufus. He came home. He wouldn't leave Dean unless he had no choice. Or unless Dean sent him, Elizabeth whispered. Niels froze mid-stride. Both stared at the sleeping dog, scarred, one ear notched, the head wound still red despite treatment. You think Dean told him to find help? Niels asked, voice barely audible. I don't know what to believe anymore, Elizabeth admitted, shoulders sagging. I want to think they're alive. Of course I do. But 2 years, Niels. No ransom, no sightings, no camps. Maybe the detectives are right. Something terrible happened. And Rufus was the only one who made it out. No, Niels said firmly, his jaw clenched in a way that reminded Elizabeth so painfully of his late father, it nearly undid her. I'm not accepting that, not without proof. He strode toward the hallway that led to the garage. Elizabeth heard him rummaging, metal clanging against metal. What are you doing? She called out. Moments later, Niels reappeared, Dean's old camping pack over one shoulder, his own hunting rifle in hand. What I should have done better 2 years ago, he said. I'm going back out there. Niels, it's already getting dark. I've got headlamps and gear, he interrupted, already loading extra ammo into his jacket. I searched back then, but maybe I missed something. Maybe now something's different. Rufus found his way home now. That means something. The police are still searching, she said gently. They're going through the motions, Mom. They've already decided Dean and Jocelyn are gone. He pulled out a tent, sleeping bag, water purifier. But I haven't. Elizabeth stood up, knees flaring with pain. "Please, wait until morning. Go with the teams." "So they can tell me where I'm allowed to look?" "No thanks." He found Dean's GPS device and tested the batteries. "I'll start from their last known location and fan out from there. New pattern, fresh eyes. Maybe someone helped Rufus. Maybe there's a camp we missed." "Niels." Her voice trembled. "I can't lose you too." That stopped him. For a second, his eyes softened. "You won't. I'll check in with the sat phone every 12 hours, but I have to do this. I can't just sit here while they fade my brother into a file folder." She recognized that look. It was the same one his father wore when he made up his mind. The same Dean used to have when he wouldn't back down. Niels was gone the moment the idea took root. "Be careful," she whispered. "I will." He pulled her into a quick hug, already turning toward the door. "Watch over Rufus. Maybe once he's stronger, he'll lead us to something." The police said the trail ran cold. "The police followed one trail," Niels shot back. "You think Rufus took the same route for 2 years? He could have come from anywhere." With one last look, he shouldered the pack and left, rifle in hand. "I'll find something, Mom. Whatever happened out there, I'll find the truth." Elizabeth stood in the doorway, watching him load the truck, every movement sharp and purposeful. She wanted to stop him, to keep him safe, but she understood. Sometimes not knowing was the cruelest thing of all. The truck rumbled off into the night. Elizabeth turned and walked back inside. Rufus was awake now, eyes watching her, tired but focused. "He's going to look for them," she said, her voice soft, "just like you did." The dog let out a low, mournful whine, his gaze drifting back toward the door as if he too had watched Niels leave. Elizabeth sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his battered head. Whatever secrets the forest still held, she prayed they'd finally come to light. The house was quiet, too quiet. Only the ticking grandfather clock and Rufus's slow, raspy breathing filled the silence. The clock read just past 10. Outside, the windows were black mirrors, the lamplight reflecting her tired face. "You remember the Sunday dinners, don't you?" she murmured. "You'd park yourself under the table, waiting for scraps. Jocelyn always slipped you roast when she thought I wasn't looking." Her voice cracked. "I miss them so much. I keep hoping. Maybe someday Dean will walk through that door, like you did, just appear, and this nightmare will end." She knew it was foolish, sitting here whispering fears to a dog. But who else was there? Niels was chasing ghosts in the forest. Her sister was in Florida, and her joints hurt too much tonight to hold a phone for long. So she kept vigil with Rufus, 2 survivors, waiting. "The police think they're gone," she said quietly, "that something happened, and you somehow made it back. But I know you wouldn't leave Dean, not unless he made you." Then came a sharp knock at the front door. Elizabeth's heart jumped. Niels? Had he changed his mind? She pushed herself up, joints protesting, and shuffled to the door. Through the peephole, she was surprised to see Officer Volkov standing on her porch, holding a manila folder. His uniform was still neat despite the late hour. She opened the door partway. "Officer Volkov, it's rather late." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Spence," he said, tone sincere. "I've been combing through Dean's old case files, cross-referencing them with missing persons reports. I think I may have found something, maybe even a lead. I thought about waiting until morning, but I saw your lights and figured you'd want to know as soon as possible." "Of course. Come in," she said, stepping aside. But as she opened the door wider, Rufus suddenly erupted. The dog launched forward, snarling, barking with raw fury. He fought to rise, teeth bared, body trembling with rage. His voice echoed through the house like a siren. "Rufus!" Elizabeth cried, horrified. "Stop that!" But he didn't stop. Even injured and weak, he lunged toward Volkov, barking so loud it shook the walls. Niels's jaw set hard, a mirror of his father at his most stubborn. "I'm not accepting anything without proof." He disappeared into the garage. Elizabeth heard the clatter of metal on metal. Moments later, he returned with Dean's old camping pack and his own hunting rifle. "What I should have done better 2 years ago," he said. "I'm going back out tonight." "It's already dark," Elizabeth pleaded. "I've got headlamps, GPS, sat phone, everything." Rufus found his way home after all this time. Something changed out there. He stuffed a tent, purifier tablets, and spare ammo into the pack. "I'll check in every 12 hours. I have to do this, Mom." Elizabeth saw the resolve in his eyes. There would be no stopping him. "Be careful," she whispered. "I will. Take care of Rufus. Maybe when he's stronger, he can show us something." One last hug, and he was gone. Truck taillights melting into the dusk. Inside, the house felt hollow. Rufus lay nearby, ribs rising and falling as he watched the door Niels had just used. Elizabeth sank into her chair and stroked the dog's head. "He's going to look for them, just like you did," she murmured. Rufus whined softly. Time crawled past 10 o'clock. Only the grandfather clock's steady tick and Rufus's labored breaths broke the stillness. Elizabeth spoke to the dog, recalled Sunday dinners, the way Jocelyn would sneak him roast under the table. Tears threatened, but she held on. A sudden knock shattered the quiet. Niels? Had he changed his mind? Elizabeth shuffled to the door, joints aching, and peered through the peephole. Officer Volkov stood on the porch, manila folder in hand, uniform crisp despite the late hour. "It's rather late, officer," she said, opening the door a crack. "Sorry, Mrs. Spence," he replied earnestly. "I've been cross-checking Dean's case files against missing person reports. I think I found a connection. Thought you'd want to see it right away." "Of course. Come in." But the instant she widened the door, Rufus erupted. The huge hound surged at the crate bars, barking and snarling with a fury Elizabeth had never seen. "Easy, boy," Volkov said, stepping back, one hand hovering near his sidearm. "Trauma can change a dog's behavior." Embarrassed, Elizabeth wrestled the weakened animal into a wire crate. Rufus continued a low, unbroken growl even after the latch clicked. "Sorry about that," she said, flustered. "Coffee?" "Coffee sounds great." Volkov's gaze swept the room. Must be hard being here alone. "Niels just left. Couldn't wait for daylight," she answered, leading him toward the kitchen. Rufus's growl followed them. "You found patterns in the files?" she asked, turning to offer him a seat. Something soft pressed over her mouth. A sharp chemical odor flooded her senses. Chloroform. Volkov's arm locked around her waist. The cloth stayed clamped to her face. She clawed at him, but strength and vision faded fast. "I'm sorry," he murmured, voice distant, "but your family left me no choice." Rufus battered the crate, barking desperately as Elizabeth slid into darkness. She woke to fluorescent glare and concrete chill, wrists bound behind her. Head throbbing, she looked up. Volkov stood nearby, uniform gone, dark civilian clothes in its place, the warmth drained from his blue eyes. "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Because your son wouldn't quit," he replied coolly. "He sent that dog for help. Now everyone's involved. Dean is alive?" Hope flared through the fog. "For now." Volkov tapped out a text on his phone. "Depends on how agreeable people are." Two burly men entered, hard faces, speaking rapid Russian. They argued. One spat on the floor. Volkov replied in the same language, then ordered in English, "Get her up. Time for a family reunion." Rough hands yanked Elizabeth upright. Her shoulders screamed. They dragged her through a maze of metal shelving and oil-stained concrete, some kind of industrial warehouse, then into a plywood cell secured with a padlock. Volkov unlocked it. "Your son has been our guest for quite some time," he said. "I'm sure he'll be glad to see you." The door swung open. In the dim light, a gaunt figure crouched in the corner, skin stretched over bones, hair matted, eyes sunken, yet unmistakably Dean's. Elizabeth's knees buckled. "Dean." He lifted his head, recognition dawning amid exhaustion. Tears blurred her vision as rough hands shoved her into the makeshift cell, and the door slammed shut behind her, leaving mother and son in the dim glow, together again, but far from safe. Dean's hair hung in greasy ropes, his beard a tangled mass. Heavy chains secured him to a support post above a stained, threadbare mattress. What little remained of his clothing looked more like rags than fabric. But it was his eyes, once warm and steady like his father's, that broke Elizabeth's heart. Now they were hollow, haunted. One of the captors slammed a boot against the post, the metallic clang echoing through the room. Dean jolted awake, instinctively curling in on himself until he realized who stood there. "Mom." The word escaped in a ragged whisper, disbelief mingling with dread. "No, no, no." Elizabeth tried to reach him, but the men held her fast. "You see what happens when you make foolish choices," one thug growled in thickly accented English. "You send the dog for help? Now your mother pays the price." Dean strained against his chains, every ounce of remaining strength poured into the futile effort. "Please, don't hurt her. She's innocent. I'll give you whatever you need." "You already gave us everything useful," Volkov cut in, voice devoid of warmth. "Your mother is here because you couldn't accept the situation. You had to be clever, sending that mutt." Dean's voice cracked. "She's 72. She needs medication. Please." "We do as we wish," the second man sneered. "You should have thought of consequences first." Elizabeth found her voice. "Dean, where is Jocelyn?" The look on his face said everything. Tears filled his eyes as he shook his head. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. This is my fault." "Touching," Volkov said dryly. "But reunions will have to wait." They dragged Elizabeth away, Dean's hoarse pleas echoing behind her. "Mom, please, don't hurt her!" Moments later, she was shoved into another section of the warehouse, a shipping container converted into a crude cell. Inside stood only a metal pole fixed to the floor. Volkov cinched zip ties around her wrists and looped them to the post, agony shooting through her arthritic joints. "Please," she gasped. "I need something, anything, to sit on. My arthritis." "Not my concern," Volkov replied coldly. "If your son cared about your comfort, he'd have kept quiet." "How long?" she forced out. "How long have you held him?" 2 years, give or take," he answered from the doorway. "DEA intelligence fetches a fine price. Let's just say your son became highly cooperative once we demonstrated consequences. First with his wife, then with the dog." The implication struck Elizabeth like a physical blow. Jocelyn? Gone. Dean tortured for 2 years, his loved ones wielded as leverage. "You're a police officer," she managed, though it sounded absurd even to her. "I'm a businessman," he corrected. "The badge is merely convenient cover." He turned to leave. "Settle in, Mrs. Spence. You may be here a while." Volkov's hand was on the door when the roar of engines cut through the hush, multiple vehicles skidding to a stop outside. He barked into his radio in rapid-fire Russian. The voice replying sounded frantic. Car doors slammed. Then a megaphone boomed. "Detective Walsh. This is law enforcement. We have the building surrounded. Exit with your hands up." Rage twisted Volkov's face. He drew his sidearm, a black Glock that seemed to swallow the dim light, and strode back toward Elizabeth. "Your son caused this," he spat. With a knife, he slashed the zip ties, yanked her upright, and pressed the pistol to her temple. "Move!" He forced her ahead, using her as a shield while chaos erupted in the warehouse. Orders barked in Russian, crates screeched across the floor, someone shouted in accented English. Elizabeth's joints screamed, but the cold barrel at her head drove her forward. "This is your final warning," Walsh's amplified voice called. "Release the hostage and surrender." Automatic gunfire answered. Metal walls pinged, glass shattered. A flashbang detonated with a concussive boom. Elizabeth's ears rang as Volkov cursed and shoved her toward a makeshift barricade, bullets crackling in every direction while SWAT closed in. Faster now, Volkov dragged Elizabeth through the chaos of crates and scaffolding, trying to weave a path to escape. They ducked beneath a thick wooden beam just as a bullet struck it. Splinters exploded, raining down on them. Volkov instinctively flinched, his grip loosening for the briefest moment. It was all she needed. Elizabeth twisted hard, pain shooting through every joint, but adrenaline surged. She stumbled, fell, and rolled behind a nearby forklift just as Volkov shouted behind her, "Damn it!" He hesitated, glancing between her and the exit, then turned and bolted, leaving her gasping on the cold concrete, shaking from shock and pain. Gunfire intensified. She heard officers shouting commands, "Move! Move! Contact left!" as the operation hit full stride. But through the chaos, one thought cut through her fear. Dean. She had to get to him. Her knees screamed, her hands bled against the rough floor, but she crawled forward. The plywood-walled cell was just ahead. Another flashbang erupted nearby, deafening thunder, searing light. She pressed on. She reached the makeshift cell. The padlock hung open from when they'd shoved her inside earlier. She pushed the door wide. Dean was there, still chained, trying to sit up on his filthy mattress. His eyes locked onto her. "Mom, get down," he rasped. "Find cover." Elizabeth crawled low and reached him, breath ragged. Gunfire cracked nearby, SWAT voices booming. "Drop your weapons, hands behind your back." Russian shouts answered, defiant, desperate. Then gunfire, controlled, clean. Another voice screamed in Russian, then was abruptly silenced. Silence followed, ringing silence. She reached her son. He stretched his arms out as far as the chains would allow. "I'm sorry," he said, voice breaking. "They took you because I—" "Hush," she whispered, cupping his face in her trembling hands. His skin felt papery, stretched thin over sharp bone. "None of this is your fault." Footsteps thundered toward them, tactical boots, fast and heavy. "Police! Anyone in here?" a voice called. "Here!" Elizabeth shouted, her voice cracking. "We're here! We need help!" Officers poured into the room, weapons drawn but angled low. They swept the corners fast, precise, then a voice broke through them all. "Mom!" Niels. He pushed past the SWAT team, his hunting rifle slung across his back. His eyes landed on Dean, chained, skeletal, broken. "Oh God!" Niels choked out. "Dean!" The lead SWAT officer stepped forward, already speaking into his radio. "Suspects down or in custody. We need bolt cutters and medics now." Another officer shouted, "We've got a critical victim. Need medics now." Niels dropped to his knees beside his brother, his face a mix of rage, sorrow, disbelief. Dean gave the faintest ghost of a smile. "Hey, little brother, you look good." "Don't joke," Niels said, voice catching. "Not now, not like this." Paramedics rushed in, moving with practiced urgency. IVs were started, vitals checked. One medic pulled out bolt cutters and began freeing Dean from the chains. As soon as the final shackle dropped, Dean gripped Elizabeth's hand, tears streaking his gaunt cheeks. "They killed Jocelyn," he whispered, 14 months ago. "She tried to escape. They shot her, made me watch, said it was my fault, because I wasn't fast enough giving them what they wanted." Elizabeth squeezed his hand tighter. "You're safe now, sweetheart. You're safe." "We need to move him," a medic said. "He's crashing." They lifted Dean with agonizing care. He weighed next to nothing. Elizabeth struggled to stand, and Niels was instantly there, helping her up. Together, they followed the stretcher from that hellhole. The warehouse looked like a battlefield. walls pockmarked with bullet holes, shell casings strewn everywhere. SWAT teams were still clearing corners, weapons ready. Others guarded restrained suspects, and then, outside. Elizabeth blinked as the night air hit her. When had night fallen? The whole compound was lit in red and blue flashes. Dozens of vehicles filled the area. 3 Russian men knelt zip-tied beside patrol cars, officers keeping watch. 2 bodies lay under white sheets, the blood soaking through. And there, in the back of a patrol car, sat Officer Dmitry Volkov, face bloodied, jaw clenched, eyes locked forward. He had tried to flee. A SWAT officer had tackled him during the escape. Now he sat in silence, no longer in control, just another prisoner under the flashing lights. A paramedic approached Elizabeth. "Ma'am, we need to check you too." But she couldn't take her eyes off Dean as they loaded him into the ambulance. 2 years. And somehow, against everything, he'd survived. Her son had been imprisoned just miles from home for 2 unbearable years. The nightmare was over, at least the visible part, but the road ahead would be steep, brutal, and uncertain. Elizabeth stood at the ICU window, one hand pressed to the cool glass, struggling to reconcile the image before her with the son she remembered. Dean had always been unshakable, tall, fit, the embodiment of quiet strength. The man lying in that bed, hooked to machines, looked like a ghost, a skeleton with familiar eyes. "Mrs. Spence." Dr. Kumar approached quietly, his expression grave. Niels stepped beside his mother, one arm around her shoulders. "We've both been checked and cleared," Niels murmured. "She's okay, just exhausted." Elizabeth's arthritis flared from the trauma, but she barely noticed the pain. Not while Dean lay like that. "He's severely malnourished, Doctor," Kumar began, glancing at his tablet. "His body weight is barely 60% of what it should be. We're concerned about refeeding syndrome, so we have to increase nutrition slowly. Severe dehydration has also affected his kidney function. We're monitoring that closely." "Will he recover?" Elizabeth asked, though the words caught in her throat. "Yes," Dr. Kumar said carefully, "but it will be slow. His joints, his muscles, he'll need long-term rehab. He may walk again with time and therapy, but it won't be easy." Elizabeth didn't flinch. Whatever it took, they'd walk this road with him. "There are some federal agents here to speak with him," Dr. Kumar added with clear reluctance. "FBI. They say it can't wait." Through the glass, Elizabeth watched 2 agents in dark suits enter Dean's room. They were respectful, careful, but it was clear the matter was urgent. She and Niels were allowed inside to support him. Dean's voice was a fragile rasp, and he had to pause often, but his mind was sharp. What he revealed chilled the room. "The warehouse," he said. "It wasn't just a prison. It was a hub for smuggling, drugs, weapons, people, sometimes from Canada. They used back roads and private land. They had border patrol on their payroll." Agent Martinez leaned in. "How many officers were involved?" Dean shut his eyes, recalling. "I saw maybe a dozen. Volkov was the main contact. Others rotated. I memorized badge numbers when I could." He recited them. Martinez's partner immediately relayed them by phone. "Cartel money?" Martinez asked. Dean nodded. "Mexican cartel, partnered with Russian mob, millions involved. They needed DEA intel, schedules, raid plans, surveillance routes. I held out for 3 months." He broke off. "They brought Jocelyn to my cell," he whispered. "Told me if I didn't talk, they'd hurt her. I gave them garbage intel at first, but they caught on." Tears slid from his sunken eyes. 14 months ago, she grabbed a gun during feeding. Tried to run, almost made it. They shot her in front of me, told me it was my fault. Niels let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a growl. Dean's voice shook. "After that, they used Rufus, Hurt him when I resisted. Burned him. Cut him. That head wound 2 weeks ago. Last time I tried to lie. Agent Martinez stepped forward. But you got him out. Dean gave a ghost of a smile. Took me months to loosen the gate. Too narrow for me, but Rufus could squeeze through. He knew the trails. Every one. How did you convince them to bring him to you? Told them I was dying. Said I'd give up safe house addresses, undercover names, if I could say goodbye to my dog. They believed me. I looked like I was already dead. Volkov never realized how smart Rufus is. For 20 more minutes, Dean gave names, locations, license plates. With every word, the agents' faces grew darker. This was bigger than anyone had guessed. An operation soaked in blood, protected by badges. Finally, Dr. Kumar stepped in. He needs to rest. The agents stood. One paused at the door. Mr. Spence, 8 officers were arrested last night. More to come. You've saved a lot of lives. Dean closed his eyes. Not the one that mattered. A knock on the door broke the silence. Dr. Hernandez entered, gently guiding a limping figure beside her. He insisted, she said softly. He wanted to see his dad. Rufus, the dog, once too weak to stand, padded carefully to the bed. Hey, boy, Dean whispered. Rufus rested his head on the mattress, his eyes locked on Dean's. His paw gently rose and settled beside his master's arm, never breaking contact. Good boy, Dean whispered, tears slipping silently. You did it. You got help. Rufus gave a low whine, curling close. Agent Martinez returned briefly. Mrs. Spence, he said, we found 3 bodies at the warehouse. Your son was right. We believe there are more, and more arrests are coming. Elizabeth nodded, unable to speak. Justice was coming, but it couldn't bring Jocelyn back, couldn't erase 2 years of agony. As the room cleared, Niels moved closer. Dad would be proud, he said, eyes glistening. You survived, Dean. You got Rufus home. Dean turned to him weary. I gave them intel. People could have died. You were tortured. You watched your wife die. You did what you had to do to survive, Niels said firmly. And you still fought back. Elizabeth pictured Jocelyn, vibrant, laughing, full of life. Gone because of greed, betrayal, and cruelty. She felt the tears again, hot, silent, unbearable. I memorized everything, Dean whispered, his strength waning. Every name, every voice, for her. They're going to pay. Rest now, Elizabeth said gently, stroking his brow around the tubes and sensors. We've got you. Just rest. Dr. Kumar reappeared. He needs sleep. You can stay, but let him rest. They did. Neil sat in a stiff chair. Elizabeth eased into a recliner a nurse had brought for her aching joints. Rufus lay curled on a blanket, eyes fixed on Dean, refusing to look away. The room went still. Only the steady beep of monitors and the fragile rhythm of Dean's breathing remained. Elizabeth leaned back and watched her son breathe, each rise and fall of victory. He was home, broken, grieving, but home. Together, they would face the wreckage. The trials, the long climb back from hell. For now, survival was enough.